Welcome to FolkFear, a place where stories are not told but remembered, like ash carried on the wind, like footsteps on old temple stone, where every tale is a ritual and every whisper is an echo from the past. Here we walk through rice fields veiled in mist, into nameless villages where no birds sing, where widows still speak to clay effigies, and drums beat in the night, summoning things that should not return. These are not merely ghost stories. They are ancestral warnings, soaked in incense, fire, and bone. You have stepped into the candlelight now. Let the story begin. In a forgotten village by the edge of a burned forest, an old monk dies clutching a drum wrapped in black silk. The villagers whisper of an ancient funeral rite banned generations ago, one that awakens the dead with rhythm. The village of Nong Chan sat like a memory at the edge of the forest, not forgotten, not remembered, simply left behind. The trees that once surrounded it had long since burned, leaving behind blackened stumps like teeth from a giant's maw. On mist-heavy mornings, the villagers would say the forest still breathed, still watched, though no one dared enter it since the fire, not since the shrine at its heart was sealed. But time, like ash, settles on even the most cursed places. And on the first night of the waning moon festival, when the veil between the worlds thins, the old monk at Wat Nong Chan died. He was not a man known by name, only by his title, Luang Po Yai, Grandfather Monk. The children of the village thought he had always been there, hunched like a dried leaf under his saffron robes, eyes sunken deep enough to hold ghosts. No one knew how old he was. No one asked. He simply was. And he died, clutching a drum. It was wrapped in black silk, the kind used only in mourning rituals, the threads brittle with time and stitched with symbols too old for the villagers to read. The novices who found his body recoiled at first, not because he had passed, but because his hands had not let go. His fingers had stiffened around the edges of the drum like claws. When they tried to pry it loose, the room grew colder. One novice's nose began to bleed. Another fainted. In the end, they called for the abbots, and even they refused to touch it. So, they burned him with it. The pyre was built behind the temple, just as tradition demanded. But when the fire rose to claim the old monk, it hissed, not from wet wood or damp cloth, but as if something within the drum resisted. The black silk curled, but did not catch. The drumhead, stretched tight with ancient leather, trembled as if struck from the inside. The abbot, a man not given to superstition, ordered the fire stoked higher. Ghee was poured, prayers were chanted. And yet, the drum did not burn. The next morning they found the fire dead and cold. The monk's bones had turned to ash, all except his hands and the drum. It sat in the middle of the ashes, untouched by flame. The black silk had unwrapped itself during the night, revealing carvings that none had ever seen. Faces with closed eyes, their mouths slightly parted, as if listening. The villagers whispered. Some crossed themselves in silent gestures. Others spat on the ground and looked away. The abbot, with fear twitching beneath his skin, ordered the drum carried back into the shrine in the forest, the one they had locked, the one they had agreed long ago to never open again. That night, they walked it there. 4 men were chosen, the strongest, the least pious, men who did not pray, men who would not tremble. They carried it through the blackened trees, past the place where birds no longer perched and insects no longer buzzed. The forest did not burn with fire anymore. It burned with silence. The shrine stood crooked and sunken, its wooden steps rotted, its doors sealed with iron nails and blessed string. But when they arrived, the door was ajar. Not broken, not forced, just open. No one spoke. They placed the drum at the center of the altar, beneath the old painting of Pra Malai, the monk who descended into the hell realms. The air stank of old incense and wet earth. When they turned to leave, one man looked back and whispered, just once, "Don't listen to it." They did not ask what he meant. In the weeks that followed, the village changed. First, it was the animals. The temple cat vanished. Then the dogs refused to go near the forest path. Chickens laid eggs with black yolks. Fish in the river floated belly up, their eyes wide and staring. Then the dreams came. People spoke in hushed tones of drumming in their sleep, faint, slow, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Children woke with bruises on their wrists, claiming someone had grabbed them in the dark. The headman's wife began to sing songs no one recognized in a language that tasted of dirt and smoke. And always the drumbeat. Low, distant, like someone tapping their fingers on the lid of a coffin. Niran, a quiet boy of 17 who worked as an apprentice funeral attendant, was the first to follow the sound. He was not brave, he was not curious, but the sound had pulled at something inside him. Not fear, not fascination, but familiarity, as if he had heard it once before, long ago, in the womb or in a grave. On the 7th night since the monk's cremation, Niran crept out of the monk's quarters, past the stupa where bones were stored, past the well that no longer gave water, and into the forest. The drum called him. The moon hung low, red as spilled oil, casting long shadows through the ruined trees. The forest did not rustle. It breathed, and with every breath, the drumbeat grew louder. 1 beat. Silence. 2 beats. Silence. Then 3, soft, spaced, like a code being spoken not with words, but with rhythm. When Niran reached the shrine, he stopped. The doors were open. Inside, the black silk had been removed entirely. The drum sat exposed, its surface shining faintly with dew. Or was it sweat? Carvings twisted across its rim, not just faces now, but hands, mouths open wide, teeth sharp, tongues curled. Niran's skin crawled. He did not want to enter, but his feet moved. The air inside the shrine was warm, too warm. He knelt, unsure why, and placed his hand on the drumhead. It was pulsing, like a second heart. And just before he pulled his hand away, something knocked back from inside. 1 beat, then another, then a voice not heard but felt. Remember us. Niran ran, but the rhythm followed. At sunrise, the village bell rang without a hand to touch it. The drum had called. and the dead were beginning to listen.
Nairon, a funeral apprentice, hears a drumbeat echo across the valley on the night of the monk's cremation. No one else hears it, but the birds fall silent, and something watches from the treetops. The night after the cremation, silence became a creature of its own. It crept through the valley like mist, swallowing every sound it touched. The crickets, once loud enough to veil thought, stopped. The wind held its breath. Even the temple bell, which swung with each passing breeze, hung motionless. Nairon lay awake beneath the thin mosquito net in the novice quarters, staring at the cracked ceiling where candle smoke had turned white paint to gray. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time his eyes began to close, a low pulse stirred at the edge of hearing, a dull, distant thud like thunder buried beneath earth. He told himself it was just memory, just the noise of the fire dying, just imagination. But when the thudding began to follow a rhythm, slow, patient, deliberate, Nairon's breath caught. Thumb. Silence. Thumb. Silence. Thumb. Thumb. It came from far away, yet it filled the room. He sat up, eyes searching the darkness. Beyond the shuttered window, the night stretched wide and waiting. He whispered a prayer his grandmother used to say for restless spirits, but his voice faltered halfway through, for the air itself seemed to press against his throat. The sound faded. For a moment, he thought it had gone. Then the dogs began to bark. First one, then another, then the whole line of village mutts, their howls threading through the dark like frayed cloth. Nairon swung his legs from the bed and stepped onto the cool tile floor. He hesitated at the door. Outside, the air was thick with the scent of wet ash, the lingering breath of the monk's cremation fire. The temple courtyard shimmered faintly in the moonlight. The incense urn still smoked, though no sticks had been lit since sunset. Nairon walked toward the steps that led down to the rice paddies. Every step seemed louder than it should. When he reached the edge of the field, he stopped. Across the valley, beyond the fields, beyond the sleeping huts, somewhere deep in the blackened forest, the sound came again. Thumb, thumb, thumb. 3 beats, always 3. And then a pause long enough to feel like a held breath. He waited, heart knocking against his ribs. Then something new, a 4th beat, soft but clear. Thumb. The rhythm had changed. It was no longer just sound, it was calling. The next morning, no one spoke of it. The old women selling rice gruel in the market chatted as if the night had been ordinary. The monks ate their alms in silence. Even the abbot, who always nodded to Nairon as he passed, looked through him that morning, as though the boy had become part of the air. Nairon tried to ask the temple caretaker, an old man named Charn, whether he had heard anything strange. Charn only shook his head. "My night has its own sounds," he said, eyes fixed on his broom. "They're not for the living." But something was happening to the living. The chickens would not cross the yard. They gathered near the fence, necks stretched, staring toward the forest. The cows refused to eat. The village dogs had gone silent now, their tails tucked between their legs, eyes wide and yellow in daylight. Even the river, usually a chatter of flowing sound, moved like black glass, unbroken, unbothered by wind. When Nairon looked at it, he thought he saw ripples moving against the current. That night, the sound returned. He had promised himself not to listen. He even stuffed cotton into his ears, praying until his mouth went dry. But sound doesn't need permission. It finds its way through walls, through breath, through bone. At the stroke of midnight, the silence
fell again. Then came the rhythm. Thumb, 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 thumb. It was closer now. He rose, trembling. The other novices lay still, too still, like sleepers caught in something deeper than dreams. Their chests barely moved. Niran opened the door and stepped outside. Moonlight fell on the temple courtyard in silver pools. The wind stirred faintly, carrying the smell of burned offerings and lotus stems. He followed the sound down the stone steps, past the Buddha statue whose eyes gleamed faintly with reflected moon, and through the bamboo grove that bordered the temple wall. The further he walked, the stronger the pulse became. When he reached the edge of the forest, the sound stopped. He waited. Nothing, not even the hum of insects. Then, from the trees, came the whisper of something breathing. He froze. The shadows shifted, but the air did not. And then he saw it. At the edge of the clearing stood a shape, not quite a man, not quite shadow, tall, draped in tattered monk robes that fluttered, though there was no wind. The figure's hands were clasped before him, as if in prayer. Niran opened his mouth, but the name caught in his throat. The figure lifted its head, and though its face was hidden beneath the cowl, two small lights glowed where eyes should have been. The drumbeat returned, not from the forest this time, but from inside his own chest. Thumb, thumb. The figure raised its hands. Niran stumbled backward, tripping on the roots behind him. When he looked again, the figure was gone. Only the smell of wet soil and old smoke remained. And from the shrine deep in the trees, a faint light flickered. He didn't remember running home, only the slamming of the door and the rasp of his own breath. The candle by his bedside flickered and went out. He stayed awake until dawn, clutching his prayer beads so tightly they cut into his palms. Morning brought rain, brief, hard, then gone. The headman arrived at the temple, his face pale, hat still dripping. The villagers had found something at the riverbank. A cow, dead, belly swollen, eyes white and rimmed with blood. Around its neck, black silk, tied in a ceremonial knot. No one claimed it. No one said the word that hovered in everyone's mouth. Cursed. That afternoon, the abbot summoned the monks. He stood before them in the hall, voice steady but strained. There will be no more mention of the drum, no talk of noises, no talk of dreams. The dead have been honored. That is all. But, as he spoke, a sound echoed from the rafters above them, faint, hollow, like something tapping wood. Everyone froze. The abbot's eyes darted upward. 3 beats, then silence. Niran looked up, breath locked in his throat. From the beams, a thin line of dust fell, as if something unseen had just climbed across them. That night, sleep became a distant country no one could reach. The villagers lit candles before every door. The monks chanted until their voices broke. Still, the rhythm found its way through, muffled by walls, filtered through dreams, but always present, a heartbeat that wasn't their own. And on the hill where the forest began, the shrine's door creaked open, inch by inch, until the wind could slip inside. Something had returned to Nongchan, something that listened, something that waited for the next beat. A grieving widow brings an offering to the temple and disappears by dawn, leaving behind only black feathers and blood on the altar steps.
Her husband's body was never found, and now he walks again. The third night after the fire, the rain came softly, not enough to cleanse, only enough to remind the land that it was still alive. The drops fell in long, uneven threads, tapping on roof tiles like fingernails. The forest beyond the temple glistened wet and black, the kind of darkness that drinks light instead of giving it back. Niran sat beneath the eaves, staring at the puddles rippling near the stone steps. He had not spoken to anyone since the night of the sound. His face looked older, hollowed out by sleeplessness. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw that shadow in monk's robes and felt the drum's echo vibrating through his bones. He wanted to forget, but the world did not let him. That evening, when the temple bell marked the 6th hour, a woman came walking up the path, barefoot, soaked, her white mourning dress clinging to her thin frame. She carried a bundle wrapped in banana leaves and tied with red thread. Her hair, once neatly bound, hung wild and heavy over her face. The monks recognized her. Mai Shri, the widow from Bantung. Her husband, a woodcutter, had vanished 2 moons ago when he went into the forest at night to hunt for firewood. All they had found was his cart overturned near the shrine and deep gouges in the mud, as if something had dragged him away. The monks had prayed for his soul, but the body was never found. Now, his wife stood before the altar, trembling, lips blue from cold. She said nothing. She only bowed 3 times, each one slower than the last, and placed her bundle at the base of the altar. The abbot asked gently, "What is your offering, Mai Shri?" Her voice came cracked and distant, as though spoken through a mouth full of earth. "An offering for one who cannot rest." She turned, her eyes finding Niran through the rain. He shivered under that gaze. It was not anger she carried. It was exhaustion, the kind that lives longer than flesh. Without another word, she left the bundle and walked back into the storm. No one saw her again. The monks waited until dawn before unwrapping the offering. They feared what might lie inside. Offerings to the restless dead were not forbidden, but they were dangerous. They could invite more than they appeased. When the first light touched the horizon, the abbot and 2 novices approached the altar. The bundle sat where it had been left, undisturbed, untouched, yet the ground around it was wet with something darker than rainwater. The abbot knelt and carefully untied the red thread. Beneath the banana leaves lay 3 items: a bowl of rice dyed black with ash, a folded white cloth embroidered with a man's name, and a small drumstick carved from bone, still wet. The air grew thick, the kind that hums inside the ear before lightning strikes. Then came the smell. Not decay, but sweetness, heavy and wrong, like rotting fruit left under sunlight. The abbot recoiled. One novice dropped his candle and fled. The other whispered a prayer, trembling so hard the flame danced in every direction. When they looked again, black feathers littered the altar steps, hundreds of them, glistening wet, though no bird had flown there. And between them, a trail of blood. It led from the altar to the forest path. The headman ordered a search at once. Villagers with torches and dogs combed the woods until the sun dipped below the horizon again. They found no trace of the widow, only her footprints, which ended abruptly at the clearing before the shrine. There, the earth was disturbed, not dug, not trampled, moved,
as if something beneath had shifted to make room. That night, Niran dreamed again. He stood in the forest where the trees leaned too close. Rain dripped from their branches, slow as tears. The air smelled of incense and wet ashes. Ahead of him, a light pulsed between the trunks, faint, rhythmic, familiar. The drum. He followed it, his bare feet sinking into the mud. The rhythm grew clearer. Tum, 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 tum. The same pattern. At last he saw it, the drum half buried in the soil, wrapped again in silk. And beside it knelt Mai Shri, her face turned away, her hands pressed flat to the ground. She was singing.
The song was not of grief, it was of calling. A melody older than the village itself, words that rose and fell like breath drawn from the pit of the earth. Her voice cracked on the final line, and the drum answered her with one heavy strike. Then silence. She turned her head toward him, and Niran saw her face, not rotting, not bleeding, but pale and calm, her eyes open and empty. "He came back," she whispered, "but he does not know me anymore." Her mouth moved again, but no sound followed. The forest bent forward, listening. Then a hand, gray, bloated and dripping, reached from the earth beside her and gripped her ankle. Niran screamed and woke to the sound of thunder. At dawn, villagers found footprints along the edge of the river. They belonged to a man, bare feet, large, each one pressed deep into the mud. The prince led upstream, then vanished where the fog grew thickest. An old fisherman swore he saw someone walking across the shallows at twilight, a man with a shaved head, wearing nothing but the tattered remains of a white shroud. When he called out, the figure turned and smiled, with teeth black as soot. In the temple, the abbot gathered the monks once more. His voice shook now, though he hid it beneath ritual calm. "We must seal the shrine again," he said. "Whatever lies there listens to us now." He told them to burn incense and chant through the night, to let no silence fall between verses. The sound of chanting, he said, kept the hungry things from entering. But they were already inside. That night, when the chanting reached its loudest, a wind tore through the temple hall, extinguishing every candle. In the darkness, a single drumbeat rang, not from outside, but from within the hall itself. Thum! The monks froze. The abbot raised his voice, praying faster. Another beat followed, closer. Thum! And then, faintly, they heard a woman's voice, humming. Niran turned toward the sound. At the far corner of the hall, the shadow of Mai Sri stood beneath the Buddha statue, her wet hair hanging like a curtain. In her arms she cradled something round, wrapped in cloth. "He walks," she whispered. "He walks again." The abbot screamed for the others to look away, but it was too late. The figure opened her arms, and the bundle she carried fell to the ground and unrolled, revealing the black drum, glistening with moisture as though freshly pulled from the soil. The moment it touched the temple floor, the Buddha statue's eyes seemed to dim. The monks fled. Niran did not. He couldn't move. The woman stepped closer. Her feet left no prints. Her eyes, though hollow, reflected firelight that wasn't there. She lifted one hand and placed a finger over her lips. She said, "Listen." Then, thump. A single beat. From nowhere. From everywhere. The sound crawled through the floorboards, into the bones of the temple, into Niran's heart. It was soft, steady, and alive. When he blinked, she was gone.
Only the drum remained, and from its rim, black feathers drifted slowly to the floor. By morning, the monks found Niran asleep at the altar, his face pale, his hands resting gently on the drum. The abbot shouted for him to let go, but he didn't stir. When they pulled him away, his palms bled from the grip. The drum's edge had carved tiny cuts into his skin, yet his lips were curved in the faintest of smiles. He whispered something they could barely hear. "It knows my name." The villagers wanted the drum destroyed, but when they tried to lift it, it was as if it had grown roots. It would not move, would not budge, though 5 men strained with ropes and poles. In the end, the abbot covered it with white cloth and warned them never to touch it again. He said it belonged to the dead now. No one argued. That night, from the forest, the drumming returned, faint but steady, and somewhere in the distance, someone sang a widow's song. The words were lost to wind and rain, but the rhythm remained. Thumb, 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 thumb.
Niran uncovers a sealed chamber beneath the shrine's old floorboards. A burial drum lies within, carved with faces and tied with hair. When he strikes it once, it answers with a second beat. They sealed the drum in the shrine again. This time, the abbot didn't wait. He gathered the village elders, burned offerings in all 4 cardinal directions, and tied white blessed string around the pillars. They spoke the names of the dead aloud, not to banish them, but to ask them to sleep. But sleep did not return to the village. Niran heard the beat even when no one else did. In the silence of morning, in the breath between the chants, in the whisper of his own footsteps, it was there. Thumb, soft, patient, calling. He no longer dreamed of people, only drums, and sometimes drums that breathed. The shrine had always stood with quiet reverence, even in ruin, even forgotten, even burned and rebuilt and burned again. But Niran had begun to feel its bones, the creak of its steps, the bend in its frame, the sound of something hollow underfoot. One morning, before sunrise, he returned to it alone. The forest let him pass. No birds called, no branches moved. Even the dogs had stopped following him. Something in him had shifted, something the villagers would later say they noticed but could not name. He no longer blinked as often. He stood too still when he listened, and his shadow seemed slower to follow him. Inside the shrine, the smell had changed, less like dust, more like wet soil, like graves. The drum sat under its cloth, untouched, but the sound did not come from it anymore. It came from below. He knelt on the shrine's rotting floor and pressed his ear to the wood. The beat was faint, as if someone were knocking softly beneath him. His breath caught. The wood felt warm, alive. He reached for the loose planks. The boards came free easier than they should have. Old wood, softened by years of rot and reverence. Beneath them lay not stone, not soil, but another layer of wood, this one harder, darker, carved with markings too old to read. A trapdoor, bound shut with braided hair. Not rope, not string, hair, long, gray, and woven with bones of birds and teeth of small animals. Niran's stomach turned, but his hands did not stop. As he touched the braid, the drum behind him hummed, not loudly, not angrily,
just enough to say, "We see you." He untied the braid slowly. The last strand came loose with a sound like breath leaving a body. Then the trapdoor opened. The air that rose from the chamber below was cold, but not dead. It carried with it the scent of rituals, camphor, smoke, copper. It was the scent of things once sacred, now forgotten. Niran lowered himself into the dark. The chamber was small, barely wide enough to stand in. The walls were lined with cracked clay jars, each sealed with wax. Old offerings, remains, bones perhaps, hair, bits of cloth. But at the center, resting on a raised stone platform, lay a second drum, smaller than the one above, older. Its body was made of blackened teak, carved with countless faces, not serene like the Buddha's, but screaming. Some had no eyes, some had too many eyes. Their mouths gaped open as if the rhythm had been forced into them. The drumhead was stitched skin, mottled and thin. Its rims were bound with teeth, and tied around it was a noose, frayed and dark with something long dried. Niran reached out, not with fear, not with reverence, but with recognition. This was not new to him, not truly. His fingers brushed the surface. Warm. It throbbed beneath his touch like something dreaming. And then he struck it. Once, softly. The sound was low, but long, and it did not fade. It returned. From the shadows, a second beat came back, a reply. Thumb, thumb. Niran's breath caught. He waited. Then beneath his feet, the ground answered, not just with sound, but with movement. The floor above creaked, the cloth above stirred, something shifted in the shrine, and somewhere beyond the trees, the birds began to flee. He climbed back up, slowly, unsure if he had just called or been called. When he emerged, the sky was still dim, neither night nor morning, the hour where shadows stretch longest. He turned to look at the cloth-draped drum. It was uncovered. He had left it covered. Now it sat bare, the silk fallen beside it like shed skin, and on the drumhead, a handprint, small, childlike, pressed into the surface as if someone had touched it from beneath. That day, Niran spoke to no one. He helped prepare the offerings. He swept the temple. He nodded when spoken to. But behind his eyes, something was listening. The monks noticed, so did the children. He no longer walked with his heels, only the balls of his feet. He stopped responding to his name the first time it was called. He hummed when alone, and always, always, his fingers tapped, thumb, 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 thumb. The abbot finally confronted him at dusk. "You went to the shrine again," he said. "Did you open it?" Niran said nothing. "Did you touch it?" A pause. Then, softly, "It touched me first." The abbot's face changed. His voice dropped. "Do you know what you have awakened?" Niran looked up. His eyes were not wild. They were calm, like a lake hiding something beneath. "They were already awake," he said. "I only heard them." That night, the floorboards of the shrine cracked. The trapdoor opened itself. From within the second drum rose, without hands, without ropes, and sat beside the first. Side by side, twin hearts, twin graves, and in the dark of that wooden room a beat began to grow, not from hands, not from sticks, but from the drums themselves. Thumb, thumb. One would strike, the other would answer. The forest leaned in. The village held its breath, and the dead began to turn in their beds.
The elders forbid speaking of the drum, claiming the ritual is cursed. But each night, someone is missing, and each morning, a villager swears they remember no such person. The sun rose quietly over Nongchan, too quietly. Roosters did not crow. The dogs did not stir. The rice paddies, usually loud with frogs and buzzing life, lay still beneath a colorless sky. It was morning in name only, as if the village had overslept the light. Niran stood beside the temple gate, watching the clouds drift without purpose. The air was heavy again, not just with heat, but with absence. Something was missing. At the morning offering, one of the novice monks, little Kiet, did not show. His robe lay neatly folded on his cot. His sandals were still at the door. No one had seen him leave. No one had heard a thing. Niran felt his stomach knot as he looked at the empty bed. There were no signs of struggle, just a faint trace of ash near the pillow, and a single black feather tucked beneath the blanket's edge. The abbot said nothing. His silence was sharp and practiced, like a blade kept sheathed out of fear of what it might cut. But Niran noticed something else. No one else mentioned the missing boy. By mid-afternoon, even the boy's closest friend, a novice named Rune, seemed puzzled when asked. "Kiet?" Rune blinked. "There's no novice by that name." Niran frowned. "He slept right beside you." "I don't think so," Rune said, scratching his head. "Are you sure you don't mean Kun?" There had never been a Kun. And when Niran checked the temple's registry scroll, the one every monk signed upon entering, the name Kiet was gone. That evening he spoke with Charn, the old temple caretaker, a man who had lived through the village's many winters and had seen too many strange things to be surprised by silence. "Do you remember a boy named Kiet?" Charn looked at him a long time before answering. "Some things," he said slowly, "don't like being remembered." "He lived. He slept beside me." "I believe you. But belief won't keep you safe, lad. Forgetting, sometimes, that's the only kindness the dead ask of us." "Then what happens when we remember anyway?" Charn did not reply. He only lit a stick of incense and whispered a name that Niran could no longer pronounce. That night, Niran kept watch from the novice hall. He lit a candle beside every door. He tied bells to the window slats. He sharpened his ears to hear every creak in the wood. But nothing came until just before dawn. The bells did not ring. The candles did not go out. But when he turned to check the room, one of the beds was empty. Rune was gone. His robe, too, was folded, his pillow undisturbed. Only a thread of red string, the kind used for funeral offerings, lay across the blanket. And when Niran tried to speak his name, he couldn't. His mouth moved, but no sound came. His memory blurred. A fog crept across the shape of the Goy's face in his mind. He ran to the abbot's quarters, heart pounding, words failing. The abbot was already awake, standing before a bowl of water,
staring at his own reflection as if seeing someone else. He pointed, breathless. "The others, they're disappearing." The abbot didn't blink. "No one has disappeared. You know that's not true." "You are mistaken." His voice was flat, but his hands trembled. "I remember them. I remember everything." "Then you are in danger." That finally broke the surface. The abbot turned, his eyes sunken, his skin drawn tight across his bones. "The drum calls not just the dead, boy. It feeds on memory. It erases to make room." "For what?" The abbot closed his eyes. "For those who were never buried properly. For those who were forgotten unjustly. For those who beat the drum long ago." He stepped closer, voice lower. "We sealed the shrine. We stopped the funeral rite." "The wrong Kunte," Niran said softly. The abbot froze. "Where did you hear that name?" "It was in the drum, carved beneath the shrine." The abbot backed away. "You opened it." Niran did not answer. He didn't need to. By the next morning, 4 more names were gone. The rice seller, the fisherman's daughter, the midwife, the old man who rang the prayer bell. No one remembered them, not even their families. Houses stood with doors wide open, beds still made, clothes still drying on lines, but no one questioned the emptiness. It had folded itself into the village like a page turned too quickly. Only Niran carried the weight. He returned to the shrine that night. He brought incense, not to banish, but to offer. He brought salt, rice, a string of bells, every charm he knew, every rite he could recall. The 2 drums sat beside each other like guardians. He knelt between them. "I know your rhythm," he whispered, "but I will not forget. I will not give you their names." The drums were silent. Then, "Tum." Just once. Then again. "Tum. Tum." Then a whisper from the dark corner of the shrine. "Then give us yours." Niran looked up, eyes wide. The shadows behind the altar shifted, too thick, too tall. A figure stepped forward. He wore no face, only a reflection of his own. And behind him more shapes. Each one carried a silence. Each one once had a name. He fled the shrine, running barefoot through the night, but as he passed through the village square, he stopped. There in the center stood a woman in white. Her head bowed, her hands cupped something close to her chest. Niran stepped closer. She looked up. "My Sri." Her eyes were gone. Only shadows filled the sockets. "You remembered me. That is why I can return." She opened her hands. A tongue, still warm, still twitching. "But they will take your words now, and next, your name." Niran turned to run, but behind every hut, every doorway, figures began to appear. All silent, all watching, all with mouths closed, but hearts beating in rhythm. Tum, tum, tum.
The cremation pit no longer consumes flesh. The bones remain, grinning, untouched by flame. And one monk begins chanting in a voice not his own. They built the fire 3 times, each one hotter than the last, each one brighter, louder, more desperate. And each time, the bones remained. The man who died had been a respected elder, a father, a grandfather, a former rice council chief. He passed in his sleep, with coins on his eyelids and flowers at his feet. His death should have been peaceful, clean, ritual. But when the flames rose around his wrapped body, the monks noticed something wrong. The smoke didn't rise, it curled low, hugging the ground like fingers clinging to cloth. The fire hissed, not like wood, but like breath, like something inside the pit resisting. They waited, they chanted. But when the fire died and the smoke cleared, the cloth had burned away, the flesh had blackened, and the bones still sat whole, still upright, still smiling. At first they blamed the rain, the wood, bad preparation. They tried again the next morning. New timber, more ghee, longer chants. But again the fire could not consume. The bones cracked, yes, but they did not fall, they did not scatter. They held their shape, arms crossed, head bowed, spine stiff. The abbot stood silently at the edge of the pit. "It's begun," he said. Niran watched from the shadows. He had stopped pretending to be a novice. He no longer followed the temple's routines. He listened more than he spoke. The drums echoed in his head now, even when they didn't play. He had begun to sense the rhythm of decay, the heartbeat of forgetting, and now it pulsed in the cremation grounds. He stepped closer to the pit once the monks had left and stared at the bones. There were no birds, no insects. Even the flies avoided it. He leaned forward, breath trembling. The skull turned slightly toward him. Only a fraction, only enough to notice, only enough to say, "You're next." That night the monks gathered to chant, not for the elder, for themselves. Something was unraveling in Nongchan, and the older monks remembered the signs. Long ago, the village had performed a funeral rite called Rung Kun Te, the calling of the departed. It was meant to summon loved ones for a final goodbye, but it had been corrupted. One drummer had kept playing long after the ceremony ended. He had called too deeply, and what answered had not been the ones they lost. The forest burned for 7 days. The shrine was sealed. The drums were buried, and they swore never to drum again. Until now. During the chant, Brother Panit, a young monk known for his soft voice and kind smile, stood up without warning. His eyes were closed, his hands moved unnaturally, like strings pulling limbs not his own, and from his mouth came a different voice, rough, old, cracked with time. "Pra Malai does not come for the forgotten." The chanting faltered. Pinit continued, his face blank. "Offerings left for the dead rot faster than flesh, but names feed the bones." He opened his eyes. They were white. "You burned the bodies, but you never burned the names." He collapsed. The other monks rushed to him, but Niran stood still. The words echoed in his ears like the slow beat of the drum. "You never burned the names." Later that night, the cremation pit caught fire on its own. No one was near it. No one had lit it, but the fire rose tall, green and blue, without heat. And in the flames, the bones danced, not with joy, not with anger, but with purpose. Their mouths moved as if singing, though no sound came. When the villagers arrived, the flames died instantly. Only one thing remained in the ashes: a scrap of cloth with a name written on it, burned around the edges,
but legible in the center. Niran. The abbot summoned him at dawn. He was pale, older. His voice cracked more than usual. "They know you now," he said. "They've always known me," Niran replied. "Why you?" the abbot whispered. "Because I heard them before I was taught to fear them." The abbot sighed. "You must stop going to the shrine." "I don't go to the shrine. The shrine comes to me." That evening a fire was built again, not this time for the dead, but for remembrance. The abbot called it a cleansing rite. The villagers were told to bring pieces of cloth with the names of their ancestors, to place them in the fire, to release them into peace. Hundreds gathered. Names whispered, names cried, names forgotten and now reborn. One by one the cloths were dropped into the flame. The smoke turned silver, the wind picked up. Then one woman, old and blind, stepped forward, holding a black cloth. "This one," she whispered, "is for the child I never buried." She dropped it in. The fire screamed, a sound like 1,000 flutes shattering in unison. The ground shook, the villagers stumbled back. The black cloth would not burn. It twisted mid-air, spun and rose. And from the smoke, a tiny hand reached out. It gripped the edge of the pit. It pulled. Something began to climb from the fire. The abbot shouted a chant, but his voice failed. The villagers fled. Only Niran stayed. He stared at the shape rising, small, shrouded in smoke, eyes hollow, mouth stitched with silence. The child stepped from the fire, but it did not fall to ash. It walked straight to Niran and whispered, "I remember you." Niran fell to his knees. The fire collapsed inward, devouring itself. Only the child remained. She knelt beside the name cloths and with a single breath extinguished them all. Silence fell. The wind stopped, and every bell in the village rang once, and never again. By sunrise, the cremation pit was gone. Only black earth remained, and at its center, a drum sat. Not the one from the shrine, a new one, smaller, wet, beating on its own. Tum, tum, tum. It was the sound of forgetting, learning how to speak.
A bell once used to guide spirits tolls at 3:13 a.m., though no one dares pull its rope. A child claims to hear his dead sister singing from inside the bronze. There was a time when the bell tower of Wat Nong Chan rang only for the dead. It stood at the edge of the temple grounds, tall and narrow, carved from weathered teak and bound with iron. The villagers once believed the bell's toll could guide wandering spirits toward the next life, a sound to show them the way, like a lantern hung in fog. But that belief had been buried, and so had the bell. Its rope, once braided fresh each season, now hung rotted and tangled, draped in spider silk and silence. The clapper had not moved in years, until the night it rang on its own. It was 3:13 a.m., the hour of the bell, the hour when silence speaks back. The villagers heard it, 3 deep tolls, slow and wet, as if struck underwater. Gong, gong, gong. It woke dogs, it silenced roosters, it curled dreams into dread. No one moved, no one spoke, and when morning came,
The tower was still standing, but the rope was freshly cut. They asked who had rung it. No one answered. The monks denied it. The novices swore they never approached it. The bell tower had long been considered off-limits, sealed by memory and fear. But someone had climbed it, and something had listened. Later that day, a boy named Ek, small, wide-eyed, the son of the village seamstress, stood alone near the base of the tower, whispering to the wind. Niran watched him. Ek pressed his ear to the wooden beam, nodding slowly, lips moving without sound. Then he sang. It was not a child's song. It was a funeral dirge, slow, rhythmic, older than Ek could have known. Niran approached carefully. Who taught you that? Ek looked up. His eyes didn't blink. My sister. You have no sister, Niran said gently. Ek took at his head. Not anymore. He touched the tower's base. She lives in the bell now. The village had buried Ek's sister 3 months ago, a fever, sudden and sharp. Her name was Molly, and she had loved to sing. She was 6. Her grave lay at the temple's edge near the banyan roots, a simple stone, no photograph, just her name hand-etched by her mother. That night, the grave cracked. No one noticed, except Ek. At 3:13 a.m., the bell tolled again. This time, 4 times, each deeper than the last, each trembling with something that was not sound, but weight. Inside the novice hall, Niran sat up in bed. His hands tapped unconsciously against his thighs, the rhythm now part of him. He rose. He did not light a lantern. The moon was enough. Outside, the bell tower loomed like a finger pointing at something unseen. The door was open, the rope cut and retied. Inside, the spiral staircase moaned with each step. Niran climbed. Halfway up, he heard it. A voice. Small. Sweet. Singing. When the drum calls and the bell sings, we come back without our wings. The voice came from inside the bell. Niran's skin crawled. He reached the top platform and found Ek sitting cross-legged beside the bell, smiling. She likes you. She remembers your name. Ek, come down. She said it's too late. The bell swung slightly, though no wind blew. Its bronze surface gleamed, not with light, but with faces, dozens, maybe hundreds, not carved, reflected across the metal like memories skipping water. All of them with mouths open. Suddenly, the bell tolled again, but no rope moved, no clapper swung. The sound came from inside. Niran staggered back. Ek laughed, not cruelly, not childishly, but with relief. She said, I can go now. Then he stood and stepped into the bell, as if it were water, as if it were home. The bell stopped swinging, and Ek was gone. When the monks arrived, they found only Niran at the top. He said nothing. They searched the village. They searched the forest. No footprints, no signs, just one small palm print on the inside of the bell. That day, the bell was removed. The abbot ordered it lowered from the tower, but as the monks worked, they found something buried beneath the bell's base, a second rope, fresh, untouched by time, still tied, still waiting. They burned it, but the ashes didn't scatter. They sank into the ground, as if claimed. That night, no one slept. No bird sang, no frogs, no wind. And when 3:13 came, the bell did not ring. But from every corner of the village, a child's voice sang, "When the drum calls and the bell sings, we come back without our wings." And beneath the song, the faintest beat, tum, tum. Not from the shrine, not from the temple, from beneath the earth.
Niran finds a forbidden scroll sealed in the drum's hollow core, the ritual of Rung Kunte, the calling of the departed. He performs it unknowingly, and the drums summon shadows from the fields. The shrine whispered that night, not with voices, not with wind, but with memory. The kind buried in soil, not books. The kind that returns only when someone dares to knock. And Niran was knocking. He sat in the chamber beneath the shrine floor where the second drum had been found. It was no longer dark, not to him. He had begun to see in ways that had no name, patterns in dust, breath in walls, the shape of sorrow in silence. The two drums now sat side by side, and between them, nestled in a cavity carved deep into the shrine's spine, was a scroll, wrapped in black cloth, bound with red wax, stamped with a symbol no monk had dared inscribe in 2 generations. A hand open and upside down, fingers pointing into the earth. He touched it. The wax cracked like old bone. The scroll unfurled with a sigh. The parchment was brittle. The ink had bled with time, but the script was legible, sharp and twisted, written in the old tongue, used only in funeral rites before the fire that had almost erased this village. At the top it read, Rung Kunte, the rite of the calling drum, for those whose names were buried, whose bones were never claimed, and whose silence still speaks. Niran read aloud. His voice wavered at first, but the words welcomed him. The syllables clung to his tongue like threads pulled from cloth. Each line carried weight, not meaning, but memory. He didn't understand the language, but his soul did. By the third verse, the drums stirred. No hand struck them, but they began to thrum, low, steady, in harmony with his breath. Niran's eyes glazed. He kept reading, not chanting, not invoking, relearning. The shrine breathed with him. The carvings along the walls glowed faintly, not with light, but with recognition. And then the scroll changed. Its final lines shimmered. The ink shifted beneath his eyes, rearranging into his name, written not in script, but in rhythm. Thumb, 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 thumb. He dropped the scroll. The drums stopped. The silence that followed was not peace. It was preparation. That night, the rice fields bent without wind. From the northern edge of the village, where lanterns no longer burned, the earth opened like breath drawn deep after burial.
And from the paddies, shadows stood up. They were not fast, they did not run, they walked, dripping, pale, dressed in what remained of their burial clothes. Some wore monks' robes, stained, scorched. Some wore veils, wedding garments unfinished by ceremony. Some were children, others had no faces. They gathered near the shrine. They did not knock, they waited. Until the first drum struck once on its own, thumb. Then the second answered, thumb. And then the field of shadows began to sway in rhythm. From the temple, the abbot heard the sound. He woke in a cold sweat, heart racing. He ran to the shrine alone, knowing what he would find. Niran was standing between the drums, hands open, eyes closed. He was not afraid. He was not in trance. He was listening. And the shadows beyond the shrine knelt before him, not in worship, in recognition. "You performed the rite," the abbot breathed. "No," Niran whispered. "I remembered it." The drum struck again, this time together. Thump, thump. The ground beneath the abbot shifted. He stumbled, fell to his knees. The scroll lay before him, open to the final line. But where Niran's name had been, the ink had changed. It now read, "He who calls must be called in turn." The abbot arose with voice trembling. "You must stop. You don't know what you've summoned." "I didn't summon them." "Then what are they?" Niran turned slowly, eyes glowing faintly with something older than fire. "They are the ones we tried to forget." Behind the shrine, the shadows moved forward. Not toward the village, not toward revenge, toward names. Their mouths opened. No words came, only the sound of breathing trying to become rhythm. Niran stepped aside. He did not command them. He joined them. He placed one hand on each drum, and in perfect harmony, they beat. Thump, 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 thump. The sound echoed across the valley. It reached every doorway, every well, every grave. It stirred the ashes of old bones. It rang inside the mouths of sleeping children. It twisted in the hair of grieving widows. And from the paddies, more figures rose. Not grotesque, not monstrous, just forgotten. Now remembered. At sunrise, the villagers found strange markings carved into the earth. Names, dozens, maybe hundreds. Some recognized them, most did not. One old woman collapsed in tears. She hadn't spoken her son's name in 20 years, not since they told her his body had burned in the fire. Now she whispered it again, and from behind her, he whispered back. That day, no one worked the fields. No one fetched water. The village sat still, wrapped in the rhythm. No one dared silence it. Not yet. Because they finally understood. The ritual had not been corrupted. It had only been interrupted. Figures gather outside the village gate, unmoving but watching. Eyes pale, robes soaked in grave water. One of them carries Niran's name stitched on her sleeve. The village gate had not been closed in decades. It was more symbolic than functional, a simple wooden arch tied with blessed cloth,
meant to demarcate sacred space from the wilderness. No locks, no hinges, just the idea of a barrier. But that morning, the cloth was torn, and beyond the gate, they stood, dozens of them, silent, still. Not shadows this time, not illusions carried by mist. Bodies, once people, now something in between. They wore what remained of shrouds and garments buried long ago, dirt-streaked silks, rotted uniforms, children's festival clothes. Their eyes were pale, their skin waxen, stretched. Water dripped from their fingers as if they had just climbed from the bottom of a forgotten well. They did not speak. They did not move. They only watched. The villagers saw them at first light and froze. Some screamed, others ran. A few dropped to their knees and began praying loudly, words jumbled, hands trembling, rice still clinging to their clothes from breakfast. The abbot arrived soon after, carrying a bell that no longer rang. He stood before the gate, face pale, throat dry, and the dead watched him. Among them, one figure stepped forward, a woman, dressed in a wedding sash stained with mud. On her sleeve, stitched in faded thread, was a name, Niran. He approached, slowly, each step like walking into cold water. Her face was young, beautiful once, now pale and tight with decay. Her eyes were blank, but not empty. They carried memory. And when she opened her mouth, no words came, only drum beats, soft, spoken not from her throat, but through her very presence. Tomb, 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 tomb. Niran stood before her and whispered, "Who are you?" She raised her hand and pointed to his chest, then to her heart, then to the earth. He understood, not with mind, with rhythm. "You died for me." She lowered her hand and nodded. The villagers did not interfere. They watched from behind doorways and half-drawn curtains as Niran knelt in front of the dead and bowed. The rest of the spirits remained still, like stone, like memory itself refusing to fade. By dusk, the sky turned the color of old blood. The spirits had not moved. They stood like a wall, not blocking, not advancing, just being. One child ran too close. Her name was Ploy. She had just learned to walk without wobble. She stepped over the torn gate cloth and into their space. Her mother screamed, too late. But the spirits did not harm her. They parted. And as she wandered among them, one of the figures knelt, a woman with long gray hair and a necklace of tiny bells. She smiled. Ploy reached out and touched the woman's cheek, and then giggled. "Yai," she said. And the villagers remembered. Ploy's grandmother, dead 3 years, gone in a flood, body never found. The dead were not angry. They were present, returned not for vengeance, but for recognition. But recognition has cost. That night, Niran walked through the village like a monk without temple. The drums no longer needed to be struck. They hummed on their own, like a heartbeat carried on wind. He passed each home,
stopped when a spirit stood outside, whispered their name if he knew it. Some smiled, some wept without tears. Some simply vanished after hearing their name spoken once more. But others remained. Near the schoolhouse, a man in military garb stood, one arm gone, one eye hollow. The teacher gasped. She had kept his picture hidden in her drawer. Her brother, lost in the war. He bowed to her and disappeared. By midnight, many of the dead had faded, but not all. Some stayed, because not everyone was remembered. Some had died with hatred. Some had died unseen. Some had been erased on purpose. Those were the ones that lingered. The woman with Niran's name stitched on her sleeve did not leave. She stood outside his quarters. She did not speak, but she bled. From her hands, from her feet. The blood did not pool. It dripped upward into the air, vanishing before it touched anything living. At 3:13 a.m., the bell tower groaned, though the bell was gone, and every door in the village opened on its own, windless, wordless, welcoming. The dead walked the streets, still without violence, but now with intention. They gathered around the banyan tree, the oldest one in the village, the one that had never bloomed since the fire. There they began to dig, not with tools, but with silence. And when the earth split, they pulled something out. A third drum, cracked, burned, ash-streaked, older than the shrine, older than any monk living. They placed it at the tree's base and waited. The next morning, the village awoke to a circle of footprints around the banyan, and the tree was blooming for the first time in living memory. Its leaves glistened with dew that smelled of smoke and sweet rice, and in the center of the trunk, carved deep and fresh, was a single word: return.
The rice barn collapses to reveal a hidden mass grave where the villagers once buried the last drum caller. The spirits are angry, not for vengeance, but for being forgotten. It began with a groan, long and low, like wood remembering it was once a tree. The rice barn stood at the farthest edge of the village, leaning westward like an old man bowing to a storm. Its stilts had been there longer than most villagers had been alive. The elders said it had survived the fire, the floods, and 3 monsoon seasons. But it could not survive what lay beneath it. At dusk, as Niran walked past it on his way back from the shrine, the earth gave a quiet sigh, then a sound soft but sharp, like ribs cracking. The barn collapsed in on itself, not from above, from below. Villagers rushed toward the dust, shouting, calling out for help, but no one had been inside. The barn hadn't stored rice in years, only broken baskets, old mats, and forgotten tools. Still, they dug, and what they found was not wood, it was bone. Not one, not two, dozens. Skulls stacked like clay pots, jawbones fused with earth, ribs curled inwards like hands shielding chests from blows, femurs snapped mid-movement, teeth scattered, some still rooted in jaws, others clutched between phalanges like beads. Some of the remains had been burned, others had not. All had been hidden.
The abbot fell to his knees. "We didn't know," he whispered. But Niran already did. He stepped carefully into the crater where the barn had stood. The air was thick with the scent of memory, copper, mold, and forgotten incense. The bones were old, but not ancient. Some still wore threads of cloth. One skull had a carved pendant embedded in its jaw, the kind worn only by ritual musicians. And there, at the center of the mass grave, lay a broken drumstick, blackened, cracked, tied with red string and a single braid of hair. Niran picked it up. It pulsed once in his hand, not with warmth, but with rhythm. The villagers demanded answers. The elders refused. "Old history," they muttered, "things best left buried." But the village healer, a woman named Chamria, gray-haired, hunched, and too tired to lie anymore, stood before the gathered crowd and told the truth. "This was the last drummer," she said, "the one who never stopped playing, the one who called too deeply, the one we silenced." The story came in pieces. A man born with no name, raised by monks, a gift for rhythm. He could make the air move with his hands. He could summon birds from trees and tears from stone. He led the Rung Kun Te at every funeral, until one day he began drumming when no one had died. At first, people thought it was ritual. Then the dead began to appear, and not the ones they loved. The elders, fearing what he had become, took him in the night. They broke his hands, they burned his drums, and they buried him beneath the rice barn, so his rhythm would feed the fields, not the grave. But he had kept calling, not with fingers, but with remembrance. Now the barn was gone, and the field would never grow again. Every seed planted since that night had fed on silence. Now the earth had given back its memory. The drums in the shrine echoed faintly that night. No hands touched them, but the sound moved like a tide across the rooftops. Tum, tum. It reached even the fields, and from the grave a wind rose, not loud, not angry, just ancient. Niran returned at midnight. He carried the broken drumstick. The soil welcomed him like a gate being unlocked. He placed the stick where the bones were thickest and whispered, "I remember you." The earth exhaled, and from beneath the broken stilts of the barn, a figure rose. He was not flesh, not shadow. He was the shape of rhythm, formed from memory, dust, and names unsaid. He held no drum, but as he moved, the air around him beat. The villagers fled. Niran did not. The drummer stepped toward him. Their eyes met, one living, one more than dead. And Niran knelt. "Teach me," he whispered. The drummer reached out, and with one ruined hand tapped his chest once. Tum. And Niran felt something shift in his ribs, not pain, but permission. By dawn, the bones had vanished. No one spoke of the barn again. But at night, when the wind circled the paddies, the villagers swore they heard a soft beat rising from the soil. Tum, tum, tum. A rhythm not for the living, but for those who would not be buried twice.
Bare feet walk through the dust at night, circling homes in silence. Those who tried to leave the village find themselves walking back in circles, guided by phantom drumming.
The first footsteps came just after midnight, soft, dry, bare. They moved in slow loops across the village paths, brushing through dust, rustling leaves, brushing straw mats left out to dry. But no one saw who walked them. Only the prints remained. In the morning, the paths outside every home were marked, small ovals of pressed earth, as if dozens of people had walked barefoot through the night in silence. The monks swept the ground. The elders prayed louder, but the footprints returned every night, and they began to circle, not just walk, circle. At first, they spiraled around the shrine, then the banyan tree, then the temple bell tower, even though the bell was gone. They never crossed thresholds, never entered homes, but every circle grew smaller, tighter, as if whatever made them was drawing the village inward. Niran stood at the edge of his doorway one night and watched. The moon was full, but the light didn't reach the ground. The air felt thinner. Then, without sound, the prints formed in front of him, right before his eyes. One step, then another, then 10, moving in a line, but nothing visible made them. No shadow, no mist, just absence, shaped like feet. He followed them. They led him to the rice barn ruins, now filled with moonlight that didn't flicker. The third drum sat there now. No one had placed it. It had simply arrived. And beside it, a child, barefoot, eyes closed, hands raised like a puppet pulled by string. He moved in a slow circle, dragging his feet, chanting without breath. Round and round until you're found, follow the beat back into the ground. Niran whispered, "What are you?" The child stopped, opened his eyes. They were hollow, not blind, not dead, just open too long. "I am the first who tried to leave." Word spread quickly the next morning. A trader who tried to leave the village never made it past the first mile. His cart returned alone, pulled by oxen who foamed at the mouth and would not drink for days. When they searched the forest path, they found only footprints, circles, wider and wider, ending right where they began. He was never seen again. A week later, a monk tried to go fetch help from the city. He prayed, fasted, prepared a talisman. He left before sunrise. He returned before dusk, his sandals worn, his face slack with confusion. He had walked for hours, but the birds never changed. The trees never changed. The path curved, slowly, gently, until it placed him back where he started. He wept. There is no straight road anymore, only circles. That night, the footprints grew louder, not in sound, in presence. Villagers felt them pass. Some said they woke with pressure on their chests, as if someone had stepped across them in their sleep. One woman claimed to have seen her husband walking among them, even though he had died in a flood 7 years before. "He didn't look at me," she said, "but he walked the way he used to, after work, slow, tired, like he was trying to come home." The shrine bells, long silent, rang once, on their own, not loudly, just enough to say, "They are still walking." Niran asked the abbot, "Why don't they speak?" The abbot answered, "Because memory doesn't speak, it repeats." And the dead were repeating their paths, their pain, their ritual. The next morning, the entire village found itself changed.
The sun still rose, but the shadows pointed inward. Every road, even ones leading to rivers and fields, now curved subtly toward the shrine. People began to get lost walking between homes. Children ran in circles during play, unable to stop. One girl collapsed, sobbing, unable to explain why her legs wouldn't obey. She kept muttering, "I am being walked." Naran stood at the center of the banyan tree circle that night. He listened, not just for the drums, but for the footsteps. They were everywhere, some slow, some fast, some limping, some dragging. He closed his eyes, and he began to walk with them. He felt his feet pulled, not with force, but with rhythm, not malicious, just inevitable. In his trance, he reached the shrine. The doors opened before he touched them. Inside, the 3 drums sat, not in a line, but in a triangle. At the center, a hole, fresh, dark, breathing. He knelt beside it, and for the first time he understood the truth. The drums were not calling the dead to return. They were calling the living to remember how to leave, but not forward, not backward, down. Naran whispered, "How do we stop walking in circles?" From the hole, a voice answered, soft, dry, like leaves on a grave. "Stop forgetting." That night, the villagers lit fires around their homes. They slept with salt in their pockets and knives beneath their beds. But the footprints continued, now faster, now overlapping, now louder. Even the deaf began to hear them. And at exactly 3:13 a.m., every person in the village woke, standing, feet bleeding, circles carved in the dirt around them. Not one remembered standing up. The dead were walking, and now, so were they.
The villagers perform an old rite to appease the dead, but the spirits scatter the offerings. They do not want gifts. They want to be remembered or avenged. They gathered in the temple courtyard beneath a sky that would not warm. The monks wore white. The elders knelt on bamboo mats. The villagers brought baskets full of incense, fruit, coins, folded cloth, and photographs that had faded with time. The air smelled of old jasmine and fresh regret. No one spoke the word for ghost. No one dared say cursed. They only called it what it was, the returning. The abbot stood before the banyan tree, hands trembling inside his sleeves. "They are not here to harm us," he said. "They have been denied what was owed. Tonight we repay." He lifted a bowl of salted rice and bowed low. The village followed. The rite had a name, ancient, barely remembered. Hamlon Hai Pi, feeding the hungry spirits. The ritual called for 12 offerings placed at the shrine's corners, one for each direction the soul might have scattered, and a 13th, buried, for the one who was never named. They lit the candles. They sang the old chants. They poured water into the earth and whispered names into the fire. And when it was done, they waited. The ground did not shake. The wind did not howl. But one by one, the offerings spoiled. Fruit blackened. Rice turned to ash. Photographs curled and burned without flame. And the buried bowl surfaced as if the soil itself spit it out. From the shrine came a sound. Not drums,
not bells. Breath, long and low, drawn in, held. Then a scream, not from a throat, from a memory. The monks dropped their candles, the elders clutched their prayer beads, and the banyan tree bled. Dark liquid seeped from its trunk, not sap, not water, something older, something hungry. The bark split, revealing within its folds an object wrapped in silk. The abbot approached with shaking hands. He peeled back the layers. Inside was a folded robe, the kind worn by novice monks, and stitched into the hem was Niran's name. He stepped forward without fear. "It's mine," he whispered. The abbot turned to him. "You didn't place this here." "No," he said, "but I left it a long time ago." The spirits gathered, not in anger, in expectation. They filled the temple grounds, silent, faceless, flickering like flames seen through thick cloth. The villagers watched from doorways. Some knelt, some wept. A few turned their backs, unable to bear it. And the spirits did not move, until a child stepped forward. Ploy, the girl who once wandered into their circle. She carried no offering, only her voice. She began to sing, a lullaby, off-key, honest, the one her grandmother had hummed while sewing at dusk. The spirits listened, not with ears, with posture, with stillness. Then one of them stepped forward, a woman with sewing needles in her mouth and blood on her sleeves. She reached toward the child and touched her hair, once, then disappeared. The air shifted. For a moment, peace, but only for a moment, because then the wind rose again, sharp, spiraling, rejecting. It swept through the offerings and scattered them like dry leaves. Jars broke, coins rolled into gutters, candles flickered and died. The drums in the shrine struck once, tum, and every offering turned to rot. The abbot cried out, "Why? We gave you what was due." From the shadows came an answer, a whisper, low and steady. "We do not want what you can give now. We want what you refused to give then." Niran stepped forward. "What did we refuse?" A figure emerged from the banyan roots. Not spirit, not man. A shape in robes, tattered, soaked, smelling of funeral smoke. The first drummer. His mouth opened not to speak, but to show what had been taken. Tongue cut, teeth shattered. Only his chest moved in rhythm. Tum, tum, tum. Behind him, more stepped forward, all of them missing something. Eyes, hands, names. "You buried us with silence," a voice rasped from nowhere. "You offered food but not remembrance. You gave coins but not guilt. You burned the bones and forgot the prayers." The ground beneath the shrine cracked. Roots twisted upward. From within the soil, a face surfaced, stone, worn, broken. It was the statue of Pra Malai, once seated above the drums, now buried beneath them. His eyes were gone, his hands raised in warning, and etched across his chest in blood-dark soil, "No offering can replace memory." The villagers fled. Doors slammed, curtains closed, the temple bells ran out of sync, and the spirits remained. Niran stood alone now, surrounded by the forgotten. He looked to the abbot. "We tried," he said. The abbot whispered, "Trying now does not erase the silence then." That night, no one slept. The wind did not howl, but something worse did. Regret. It rose from the ground, seeped through the walls, sang through cracks, and in every home, someone woke with a memory they didn't know they had. A name, a face, a cry, each one ending in the same whisper, "Do not forget me again."
Niran becomes the next drummer, hands moving on their own as the spirits surround him. Every beat he plays binds a soul, and the final rhythm must choose between life and silence. The drums did not sleep, even when the villagers did, even when the monks fled, even when the last candle guttered out. They pulsed through the night like hearts, no longer confined to flesh. Thum, thum, thum. And at their center sat Niran. He no longer prayed, he no longer asked, he only listened. His hands hovered above the largest drum, the first, but he did not move them. The rhythm moved him. When he struck, it wasn't with fingers, it was with remembrance. The spirits gathered again, this time not around the shrine, but around him. They formed a circle, faces unseen, veils soaked, mouths open in voiceless chant. Each time he struck the drum, one of them stepped forward, and when the beat stopped, they faded. Released? Claimed? No one knew. Only Niran. He did not speak for days, only played. The triangle of drums echoed across Nongchan. People locked themselves inside. They stuffed cotton in their ears. They recited prayers backwards, but the sound was not heard with ears. It was felt in bones. The abbot remained the only monk still at the temple. His eyes were rimmed red, his voice hoarse, but he still stood before the banyan tree each dawn. He still whispered the names of the dead. One morning, he found Niran waiting for him. "I've seen the end," Niran said. "Is it punishment?" "No," he replied. "It's remembering too deeply." The abbot fell to his knees. "Can it be undone?" Niran shook his head. "The drum doesn't take what we gave. It takes what we should have." That night, the sky split, not with thunder, but with sound. The three drums beat in unison for the first time. Thum, thum, thum. Then silence. Then again. Thum, thum, thum. Each beat shook the ground. Each pause stretched longer. And from the shrine, the circle opened. The spirits moved aside. Something stepped through. It was not the first drummer, not a ghost, not a god. It was a figure wrapped in Niran's old robes. Its face was his, its eyes were hers, the woman with his name stitched to her sleeve. Its hands were bound with red string, soaked in memory. It stood before Niran and bowed. Niran understood. "You've come to bind me." It nodded. He stepped forward, barefoot, silent.
The crowd of spirits closed in, not as jailers, but as witnesses. The drums beat once more. Thum. The figure raised its hand and placed it over Niran's heart. His breath stilled, but his hands kept playing, even as he stood frozen, even as his eyes went wide, as the villagers from every window and doorway watched the air around the shrine fracture, like heat made of sound. The final rite had begun. The drums no longer echoed. They converged. The sound did not move outward. It moved inward, pulling, binding. Niran's body stood still, but his hands moved faster. Each beat now came with a face, a name, a memory. Each beat pulled something from the earth. Each beat stitched it to the next. He had become the thread. The figure with his face circled him. For every 10 beats, it carved a symbol in the soil. Around the shrine, around the banyan tree, around the graves. The symbols glowed, not with light, but with understanding. The entire village watched. No one dared stop it. Then, the final beat. A pause. Long. Heavy. And Niran spoke. There is one name left. The air tensed. The spirits leaned in. He raised his hand and struck the last drum. Thum! The silence that followed was not empty. It was decided. The shrine doors blew open. The banyan tree split in half. The stone paths cracked. And then, nothing. Just dust. Just quiet. And when it cleared, Niran was gone. Only the drums remained, still, untouched. And each bore a mark. The first, a name scratched into its rim, Niran. The second, a handprint of blood. The third, a single red thread swaying in still air. At dawn, the villagers approached. They circled the drums and found no bodies, no spirits, only peace. And for the first time in a generation, no one heard footsteps at 3:13 a.m. The circle had closed, the binding complete, and the one who kept beating had become the silence.
At the edge of dawn, Niran walks alone into the forest shrine carrying the drum, the final beat echoing in his chest. When morning comes, the village forgets his name, but the birds sing again. There was no procession, no chanting, no bells. Only a boy, barefoot, walking into the forest with a drum in his hands. His name was Niran, but by the time the sun rose, no one would remember that. The village woke late. The air was clearer. The clouds lightened at the edges. The wind no longer carried the scent of old incense or river clay. For the first time in what felt like years, the banyan tree stood still. Its trunk, once split, had sealed overnight, smooth and silent. The shrine's doors remained closed. No footsteps, no bells, no sound. Only the faint rustle of leaves and birdsong. A woman hung her laundry and noticed she had slept through the night.
A child laughed without fear in her voice. The monks stirred but did not rise, as if some weight had lifted from their bones. No one could say why. No one even tried. Because something had been carried away in the night, and none of them remembered what. Only the abbot remembered. Or rather, he remembered that he had forgotten. He stood at the temple gate, hands clasped, lips still. His thoughts moved like wind across water. A name tugged at the edge of his tongue, but it fell before it could take shape. Still, he whispered a prayer for a boy whose face he could not call to mind. In the forest, the shrine breathed. It had grown smaller somehow, not in size, but in presence, like a once powerful spirit that had finally gone to sleep. Inside, the 3 drums no longer sat in a triangle. Only one remained, the first, wrapped in fresh silk, tied with red thread, its skin polished as if newly made, though no hand had touched it. Beside it, footprints, bare, deep, leading out the back door, into the mist. The crows did not follow. The frogs did not fall silent. Even the rice paddies glittered with warmth instead of haze. For whatever had haunted Nong Chan was not gone. It had simply been carried deeper, buried properly, by someone who remembered what the others chose to forget. Far beyond the shrine, where the forest thickened into near silence, a small mound of earth now rose, unmarked, untouched, and beneath it a drum, not broken, not cursed, just asleep, waiting not to be played, but to be left alone. At its center, a name once carved on its rim had faded, worn away by time or by something gentler. Wind, rain, mercy. No one would dig it up, because no one knew it was there. But sometimes, in the hush before rain, a soft beat could still be felt beneath the feet. Tum. Not heard, only sensed. A reminder, not a call, that remembering has its price, and forgetting its rhythm. Nong Chan lived on. Its people laughed again. Its fields grew tall. Its bells remained silent. And when someone asked why the shrine was no longer used, the elders would simply shake their heads and say, "It was sealed long ago, before any of us were born." They were wrong, but they were safe. And far away in the deepest part of the forest, beneath the roots of a tree that does not flower, a drum rests in silence, not cursed, not angry, just full of names, waiting to be remembered again.